Captivating. Yes, that's the word I'd use to describe our next guest on VOE. I heard her not long ago and was captivated by the story she told and the lesson that was contained within. In this month's VOE, Kelly Swanson pulls back the curtain on what has helped her in creating speaking success.
Kelly Swanson, you and I were on a showcase together.
Yes.
And you had this bit that had the room crying. I mean, tears coming down our eyes. It was probably some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen.
Thank you.
Everything about you is always a story. And so I want to go backwards just a little bit.
Okay.
And if I mess this up, fix it, because really it's the question to you.
Okay.
But at one point in your career, early on, you were a storyteller.
Yes.
You were not a speaker.
No.
And
No.
there's some story about Jeannie Robertson seeing you that changed your experience.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Oh, totally. Okay, so, whoa, how long was it ago? 14, 15 years ago, I was a professional storyteller.
Okay.
Yes, there is such a thing. No, you don't get paid very much, but there's a whole world out there of professional storytelling. Picture Garrison Keillor's Lake Wobegon. There's just a whole community of people who do that. And I just could tell a good story, and for me it was an entertainment thing. So I was trying to find who in the world would book me for that. Who can we get to pay us? My husband was like, "You're really good at this. Let's go find." So I thought I was an entertainer and was trying to find the places to do that. Festivals, cruise ships, whatever. And at one of those, Best of Our State Festival in North Carolina, because Jeannie and I are both in North Carolina.
Right.
I was one of the entertainers and she was the closing keynote speaker. So she was the big deal. But she had come early and she watched, because as is totally Jeannie style, she sat through mine and watched it and was so gracious. She came up to my table. I'm like, who is this tall, beautiful woman, looking at all my stuff? And she had seen my storytelling and she loved it and the characters and the town and everything. And she said, your story, the storytelling thing isn't going to work out the way you think it is. I mean, it's in so many words, that's what she was saying.
Right.
And she said, you need to be a speaker. I was like, what? I mean, to be honest, I didn't know any speakers. I was like, I was probably one of those, what, people do that? And she said, you need to be a speaker. You need to join NSA. She had me over to her house. She answered any question I ever had. I could call her, and she'd be walking on stage, and I'd go, Jeannie, I don't know how much to charge. I don't know. Jeannie, what do I do? A bureau's calling me. And she was always there and gracious. And it's funny because, as luck would have it, as we're talking, she and I were on the same flight yesterday, or whatever day it was, coming to this conference, and we had seats right. She was going somewhere else. We had seats right beside each other.
Oh my goodness!
So anyway,
wow.
So she introduced me to this world and said, repackage it, rebrand it, wrap it a little differently. But this is the world where you can actually make a living doing that.
So the simplicity of this for the people listening on VOE is you were a speaker packaged as a storyteller, in a sense.
In a sense, yes.
And
yes.
she recognized that you had the talent to become who you are today. Mm-hmm. But were it not for her, you would have just been going down a different, perhaps less profitable path.
Oh, no, most definitely. I mean, I don't know where I would have been without NSA. I mean, sorry to just totally go into commercial mode, but I would not have known anything about how to turn this into a business and make. And I mean, this shy kid that people used to make fun of, that could tell a good story, that still didn't know how I landed on a stage, I never would have imagined that I would call myself a businesswoman or business owner, that I would make money doing. I mean, it's still kind of hard to believe. Maybe for some speakers it's easy to believe, but for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, people are paying me to do this. Often paying me more than the people I'm even speaking to, might make. I mean, it's a surreal feeling for me, and I wouldn't have been able to do it if NSA didn't teach me how.
You have this incredible ability to create a story that has rhythm and rhyme, and it weaves people in.
Oh,
and
you.
How did you learn that, or was it in an innate talent?
Yes. Both.
Great.
Both. It was both.
Okay.
I had a talent, and it was raw and unpolished. I've always been a writer. I used a lot of rhyme. It was always in me, but it just wasn't honed. The craft wasn't honed well. So people could see, I would talk too fast, or the story wasn't developed, or I would just be at the mercy of my muse instead of learning how to put it together. I mean, over the past, because when you add the years as a storyteller, and even growing up doing this, I mean, I've spent my whole life doing it, and so it's sort of been a journey from I'm doing it naturally, how to do it better naturally, now how to do it on purpose on a stage, and then now what are the formulas and the pieces, what am I doing, going inside the creative process and unpacking it and figuring out, how to teach other people how to do it. It was like, whoa, how do we do this? And somewhere in there, I forgot the question you asked me.
You answered the question.
Okay, I
which
do that.
was, yes, think about it. It was it a natural talent or developed? And you're saying
it's both.
It's both.
It's both,
Absolutely.
and we see that. And I am, it's like music to me. Stories are like music, and every note matters. Whether you improv or the notes matter, and where you put them, like the words are the notes, and where you put them will change how it makes someone feel. I mean, you can add all these layers and just take them on this beautiful emotional journey. And I am probably the most dramatic example of somebody who labors over every note. And not everybody's going to go to that degree, but I think many of us can get distracted by selling another gig, or booking. We're supposed to call them bookings. But I think people can get distracted by creating a better postcard, selling a better, making more money, reaching six figures, whatever that is, and get distracted from actually working on the craft. Because I think a lot of us run the risk of really fading into the scenery if we don't take our craft up to there are a lot of people we forget as speakers, but there are not as many who really make it to the top. And I think those are the ones who are devoted to the craft.
If you're sitting there talking with someone, and let's for a moment say they don't have your innate gift, and
Okay.
I hope you'll take this as a positive thing, but I could kind of compare you to Elton John, okay?
Oh,
Now,
I love it. I got a pair of pants like his, so I get it. But anyway, yes.
But
Yes.
you know someone has been trained, and you
Yes.
know they've practiced and
Yes,
so forth, so
yes.
they make it look easy today.
Yes.
But yet they put a lot of
Yes.
intention behind
Right.
it because of all that they have done. So if someone is coming today and saying, "Okay, but I'm not a storyteller. I don't weave rhyme. I'm a content deliverer."
Yes, yes.
How would you suggest they work on honing that craft?
Okay, and people will say that. They'll say, Kelly, I can't, they'll close themselves off to learning more because they see what I do and they think, there's no way I ever could do, well, not could do it, but would want to do it that way. And I'm like, I get it, I hope you don't. I've got a very weird, untraditional approach to how I do things. I mean, you saw me talk to myself in a mirror. I mean, I'm not sure I've seen anybody do something that weird before. So they come up to me and they almost block themselves off. To answer your question, Chuck, to those who go, well, okay, but I'm not going to do it like that, or I'm an IT, I speak about IT, or I'm a financial planner, because I speak to people that aren't just speakers. They're trying to get their message out, and because I speak about connection and engagement, and they're trying to do it in all kinds of industries, and they're not going to go to the links that we as speakers go to. And here's where I try to get everybody on the same page first, and that is, story is not something we do just to entertain. Yes, it is entertaining. Yes, we can make them laugh. Yes, we can tell it in a creative way. And story is a tool. Strategic storytelling is a tool to persuade. And go look it up. The science has proven that we are not impacted, that people buy based on emotion.
Right.
They follow us, they buy into what we're saying based on emotion. So as speakers, we know we have to go not just here, but here. And yet many of us are still speaking, we're still giving them the data and the content. And yet it's being proven that the way that data is wrapped is what has the emotional impact. And that story does what data doesn't have the ability to do on its own. And I'm not saying that your content is unnecessary. I'm just saying that if you want to really get deeper and have an emotional, persuasive impact, then story is your greatest tool. So to get people to shift, it's very overwhelming and a burden when people think, I need the best story. if I haven't been blown up, if I haven't, if I haven't won anything, that I don't have a great story. They're looking for the best story. And I try to get them to shift and say, you're asking the wrong question. Stop looking for the best story. It's not the best story wins. When we got some pretty good stories, I know we get jealous of each other's stories. It's not the best story wins. It's find the right story and then make it good and make it better. When you know that it's a tool to do what you need it to do, then how good you are at it doesn't matter as much. And I've seen, let me give you an example. I have very sexy stories, I call them. My chub rub story about the sequin pants rubbing together and it makes everybody fall out. Ethel in the nursing home. I've got stories that from an entertainment aspect are high level. But I have a story about a man that owns a vacuum store and the kid he hires, the millennial. And Chuck, there is nothing fancy about it. There's no rhyme. There's no poetic nature to it. I worked on it, but it's a simple story about a man who owns a vacuum store and learns what teaches the younger millennial what the art of connection looks like. And that has such a that's one of my most impactful stories because the people in the audience can relate to it. And that's what speakers need to realize is learn to use the tool, because what you think is an unsexy story is actually having as much impact, if not more impact, than the one who's got this sizzle story, that the whole world wants to hear. Does that make sense?
It does. You've said that maybe as a kid you weren't the most popular kid in school, so you are able to look at the audience and connect with what I'm going to put into terms that some people understand, but the least of these.
Yes.
And that audience really connects with you because you're not that grand person that they can't imagine. They can actually imagine themselves in the stories that you tell.
And can I go one step deeper than that?
Please.
Let me go one step deeper. You're right, they can relate to the story. And everybody's telling us we need to be relatable, we need to be relatable. They can relate to the story on some level. But what story allows us to do when the story's told well and the emotions are included, people don't relate based on plot. We relate based on emotion and feelings. So when I'm able to say I was the picked on kid, I was the pink zebra in the room, now all the picked on kids, they're with me.
Right.
But when I can say I felt invisible, I felt like I wasn't good enough, like I didn't matter, that I was the one still sitting at the little kids' table when I'm at a conference. When I start to state the feelings, now more people in the room are becoming involved, because through a story what we connect with is the human emotion underlying it, which is why I always say, don't just tell me what happened, tell me how it made you feel, because there's where we lock in. Because I heard a woman tell a story of moving from Russia, with 2 children. Well, I don't know what it's like to live in Russia. I don't know what it's like to move to America. But when she started stating the emotions attached to it, I was like, oh, I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to try to let your kids down. I know what it feels like to be worried you're not going to meet anybody. And that's the key of it, is when you get the stories are relatable, but the emotions are what really relate to you on a really base level. And I spend a lot of time thinking about what my people need to feel and need to hear, not just what I want to teach them.
Kelly,
Yeah.
being with you is always a joy.
Oh,
and
thanks.
there
I feel the
is
same about you,
there
Chuck.
is something subliminal that happens around you
I know
that
what it
just
is.
stirs
Thank
up
you.
emotion, and it's an incredible experience and feeling. And I thank Jeannie
Yeah.
for getting you here. And I thank you for your willingness to share with others, because you're an inspiration. And somewhere, take it to the bank, you're going to see someone someday that's got some talent, and you're going to say, you need to, and that will be that life-changing experience for them. It'll be the pay it forward.
And
Thank you, Kelly Swanson,
You're welcome.
for being a guest here on VOE. It's always awesome.
Oh, thanks, Chet. Appreciate it.